For this week's video, we're going to be going over how to plan a 3-field rectum and a 4-field rectum, and really it's just a pelvis in general. This is a rectum case, but these techniques can be used for any pelvis case. And we're also going to be going over, if you notice here, we have a PTV 4500, this larger one, and then a PTV 5040. So we're going to be going over how to create your initial plan, a boost plan, and then combining them into a plan sum. Okay, so let's start with the 3-field plan. Just create a new course here. I want to select PTV 4500 for my initial plan. It's my initial volume. Okay, and just looking at this from the get-go, this is a larger patient, so I'm probably going to use 15x for all 3 beams. All right, so this is a 3-field plan that we're going to do. So where do we want our beams to come from? So we're treating the rectum, right? So that's posterior, on the posterior side of the patient. So we want a PA beam for sure. And then we're going to do a lateral from each side. We do not want an AP beam because then we'd be treating through the bladder. We'd be entering through the bladder and entering through the bowel. There's no reason to enter through OARs to treat a target when you can come in from a different angle and avoid that. We're still going to give exit dose to those structures, but exit dose is better than entrance dose, usually. Add a DRR, add my MLC. All right, so like usual, I'm going to add a 0.5 cm margin. Copy my beam twice because I want one from the left side. So this patient is prone, so now 270 is coming from the left side. And one from the right. Okay, so now I have 3 beams, all with a 0.5 cm MLC margin. My prescription, we're going to 4500, so 180 times 25. I'm going to normalize so that I have 95% coverage. I'm going to fix my total beam weight so that it's 1. Let's calculate, see what this looks like. All right, so you can see here that this is, like I said, this is a large patient. So our separation here laterally is over 40 cm, which is a lot. Usually we do not want to see this high dose kind of come out of our treatment area here. We want it to be nice and contained, you know, where all 3 beams intersect, okay, which would be right here. So only way to make that happen on this 3-field case would be to add a little bit more weight to our PA beam, right? We need to take a little bit of weight away from these lateral beams, add it to the PA beam, and there's no specific numbers you need to worry about using for your field weight. You just need your dose distribution to look how you want it to look, okay? And then you'll have dose constraints usually that you're gonna worry about. But for these 3D pelvis cases, I mean, a lot of times your OAR doses are just kind of gonna be dependent on what your PTV looks like and your block. So for example, if we're not meeting our bladder constraint, we likely would need to edit our block, which would be a conversation to have with the doctor, okay? But in general, usually I want to see, I'll weight my beams so that I don't have any 100% outside of my treatment area. So laterally here, I don't want any 100, and I want my 50% line, so this white line, to still be really tight here on this anterior side in the bladder. So let's try to take a little bit of weight off that PA beam. So I think I'm going to start here. So our 50 line is still really tight, so I'm sparing the bladder really well. And then here's superiorly, I'm still, sparing all this small bowel. So that 50 line is tight right there on our treatment area, and I don't have any, too high a dose, nothing over 100% laterally. And this dose, as we add field and fields, it should go down a little bit too. So I'm going to lock this beam, and then you can see we're a little bit off, symmetrically here. So I'm going to add a little bit of weight to this left side. Maybe a little too much. Maybe something like that, just to even that out. Okay. Now I can come here, and just like all our other 3D plans, we're going to start adding field and fields. So for these cases, these 3 field cases, you really aren't going to add any field and fields to this PA beam, right? We need to, it's hot posteriorly, right? We don't have an AP beam coming from this way. So it's going to be cold kind of up front and hot in the back. So really we want to just use our lateral beams to cool down this posterior spot, right? You can see we're cool anteriorly, hot in the back, so we're going to use both these lateral beams to cool that off. So again, like all our other 3D cases, I'm going to turn my 107 on and start blocking that out with field and fields. And this case is really hot, okay? So I'm gonna add 4%. I think it's okay for you guys to start adding, a little bit more weight to those field and fields when you think you can. If you add a little bit more weight and your plan falls apart, just go back to that 3% rule. But I think, 4 or 5%. I would not go over 5%. But if you think you can get away with 4 or 5, you can certainly do that. So you can see every field and field I add, we're cooling the plan down a little bit. We gain that little bit of extra margin on that 107. So it starts out pretty hot. We only have that 3 fields, so it's going to take a while to cool this plan down. But the whole point of doing these with 3 fields is we don't have any entrance dose through that small bowel or that bladder, so we're sparing that small bowel and bladder as much as we can with this technique. So you can kind of adjust that small bowel and bladder dose with your field weighting, but again, like I said, really it's going to come down to your block. So right now we have that half cm margin. So if we're unhappy with our bladder and bowel dose, if we need to really lower that dose, you're gonna probably adjust your block, and usually you're gonna have a discussion with the doctor and adjust that with the doctor if you're going anything out of the norm. But for this plan, just using that standard half cm margin and weighting so that 50% line is really tight anteriorly, that is it's going to be perfectly fine for this case. Start adding 5% just to make this go a little faster. I'm going to keep adding field and fields, you know, just back and forth, left and right, until I get this, this 107 gone. So feel free to skip ahead in this video if you'd like. Okay, finally got rid of all that 107. Again, I left it normalized at 95% coverage, so I know our coverage is okay. You can see now that all that all that 95% is gone because we slowly were blocking from our lateral side, so that dose laterally went down. Hotspot is 106.9, so pretty good. And that's about it. That's a 3 field. Excuse me. Again, the idea, spare as much bladder and small bowel as you can. Okay. Last but not least, we would merge these subfields. And we're done. Okay. Now let's do the same thing, but this time instead of field and fields, let's use EDWs. So I'm going to insert another plan. Again, doing the initial plan. $15X again. Excuse me. Okay. So we want those same 3 beams. We want a PA beam, 2 lateral beams. So 270 and 90. But this time, so we want to use EDWs, right? And remember from our previous plan, because we only have this PA beam, we're really hot posteriorly and we're cooler anteriorly. So we want to push dose, or we want wedges to, we want the heel to be posterior and the toe anterior, right? We want to attenuate more dose posteriorly to even out that dose distribution from the back to the front, right? And so to do that, remember our EDWs only, the heel and toe only go in the Y jaw direction. So we don't want to push dose superiorly or inferiorly, we want to come the other way. So in order to do that, we need to rotate our collimator 90 degrees. And then watch what happens. So when we put our block margin on, because now our MLCs are coming from the other direction, look, we don't get as tight of a block margin on this PTV. And remember, our main goal is to spare bladder and bowel, so we're doing okay on bowel, but look, we're gonna give a lot of extra dose on this bladder because of this problem. Okay, so this is one of the major reasons why you might not want to use EDWs, is because of this. You don't get that tight block margin depending on what your PTV shape is. So for this case, I would definitely use field and fields for this initial plan, just because of that. But for demonstration purposes, let's just see what it looks like with the wedges. Okay, so let's just take a guess. I'm gonna guess that maybe we want, so to add an EDW, we come over here to accessories. Let's start with 45. Okay, that's just a guess. We can adjust after we calculate. So again, I want my heel to be on the posterior side, right? Because I want to push, or, you know, I say push, but understand that I'm not really pushing dose, obviously. I'm just attenuating more dose posteriorly than I am anteriorly, which will even out that dose distribution, right? It'll get rid of some of that hot spots in the back and just kind of even it out, right? Let's do the same thing from this side. So I want both my heels to be posterior. Let's see what that looks like. Whoops, need to normalize here. 95% coverage. Okay. So hot spots 114, so not bad, but you can see, you know, we have these big hot spots right here, which we want to try to avoid. So just like our other case, we're going to add a little bit of weight to our PA beam. Maybe something like that. Let's even it out so it's symmetrical again. So we're going to add a little bit to this left side. All right, so pretty symmetrical. Okay, so since we added a little bit of weight to this PA beam and took weight away from the lateral beams, that means the effect of the wedges went down, right? We're delivering less dose from these beams with the wedges. So you can see our hot spot posteriorly, the hot spot didn't get big, it didn't go up really, but our dose distribution, you know, shifted. All that higher dose went more posteriorly, and let's just show that. So 41.3. I just type 30 in here, so make that go down. You can see that that higher dose shifts anteriorly, right? Because we're more dose is coming through those EDWs, so the effect of those EDWs goes up. If we take weight away from those lateral beams, you know, that weight gets shifted back because we're adding more dose from our PA beam. So hopefully that makes sense. But you know, we're pretty close. So 113, that's pretty close. So let's just see what happens when we change these to 60-degree wedges. Okay, so 45, not quite enough. 60, too much. So what do? You know, this is reason number 2 why wedges can be sometimes trickier, you know, than you think. So we need kind of something in between. You know, there's no, you can try a 60 from one side and a 45 from the other, but then it just won't be it won't be symmetrical. So I don't know, you just have to play with it. But at least if we stick with 60, we can just keep adding more weight to our PA beam. So maybe something like this. So hotspots 108, that's pretty good. We don't have any weird hot spots laterally. Our 50 line is still pretty tight on our block edge here anteriorly, so pretty good. This is probably, you know, what I would go with. But again, I would not use EDWs on this case because we cannot get that tight block margin anteriorly because of how our MLCs come in. Right, because our MLCs have to come soup inf like this, we cannot carve into this PTV shape. We cannot block bowel and bladder as good. So for this initial case, I would go with the field and field. But if I could use wedges, this is how I would plan it. So it a lot of times can be a lot quicker to plan, but for, you know, those various reasons, it might not be quite as high quality of a plan as with the field and fields. Okay, so I'm going to delete this plan. Now let's do the boost. So when I make a boost, I want to make sure my isocenter is the exact same. Okay, so you can make a new plan from scratch and type in these isocenter values right here. But usually what I do is I just copy my plan . I'm going to insert a new field, okay, just as a new field, and then delete my first 3. Okay, so now I know my isocenter is the exact same, so this X, Y, and Z coordinate is the exact same as my initial. See that? And now I'm going to make my boost plan. So this just makes the isocenter the exact same for the initial and boost, and the therapists don't have to worry about a new isocenter when they get to the boost plan. Okay, so for the boost, you can do the exact same thing as we did for the initial, right? Except our prescription, so our composite dose is 50/40, so I need to give an extra 540 centigrade, right? So that's 3 fractions. So our prescription is going to be different. Our PTV is different. We need to make a new reference point for this boost volume, so I'll show you how to do that manually. So if you created a new plan from scratch, right, you could create this point automatically, right? Part of the plan creation process is creating this point. But if you do it the way I just showed you, you need to create a manual point. So I'm going to right click here and go to new reference point and location. I call it PTV 50/40. It's already in use, so we'll just add that underscore. Our volume is our boost volume, PTV 50/40. So when you create a point like we just did, you can see that it's a physical point. So it has a physical location in the CT and I can move it around. But remember the point right here, we need that to be a virtual point. So to make this point virtual, you just right click and click delete. Then it asks you, do you want to delete just the location from the image or do you want to delete the whole reference point from the patient? We want to delete just the location. Okay, so now we don't have a physical location. This point is now virtual. So we can change it here and use it as our dose tracking point, primary reference point, okay? So our prescription is new for the boost. Our target volume is our boost volume. Our point is for our boost volume. Let's add our beams in here. We need our margin to be around our boost volume. Okay. Now, again, it's the exact same plan, right? Just on a smaller volume. So I would plan the field and field exactly how I did the initial. I want my 50 line to be tight on this anterior border. I want less than 100% hot spots laterally. So exact same thing as that initial. But look at the shape of this PTV now. This shape would work a lot better with wedges. So let's see what that would look like. So if we rotate to 90, redo these MLCs, you see we don't have that PTV shape where it concaves in and we have to treat a lot of extra area because of that. Even at 90, our MLCs conform to that PTV shape really well. So this would be a good plan to use wedges on, okay? This makes a lot more sense to use wedges. So you could plan this with EDWs, wedges, or field and fields, okay? And again, exact same process as the initial, so we're not gonna go over that again. What I'm gonna go over for this boost is how would you do this as a 4-field plan. So as a 4-field plan, pretty self-explanatory, we're going to use 4 fields. So now we have an AP, a PA, a left lateral, and a right lateral, okay? Our prescriptions is saying are correct. Let's normalize 95% coverage, change our field weighting to 1, calculate. So with 4 fields, again, I'm going to use 15x. And so 4 fields ideas, it just should make your field and field process or your wedge process just a little bit easier, right? You have that extra field, you're spreading out dose a little bit more, you have a little bit more control with that extra field on how you want things to shape out. But if I'm going to use 4 fields, I still want to make sure I'm sparing the bladder and the bowel as best I can. So when I do 4 field pelvises or rectums or anything in the pelvis, I'm going to take that AP beam, so this field 1, and I'm really probably not going to ever put any more than like 10% weight through that AP beam. Okay, so you can see at 10%, everything else is equal. You know, I don't have any hot spots laterally. My 50% line is still pretty tight, but it's always going to be a little bit looser, you know, with that AP dose than with the 3 field plan. So the 50 line is you know, pretty tight, but I'm just always going to have a little bit more bladder dose because I'm entering through, I'm putting, you know, 10% entrance dose through that bladder. But other than that, I mean, it does, you know, make the plan a little bit easier. So I'm going to lock that PA beam 2, even out my left and right here. Oh, too much. So pretty symmetrical like that. So now I can choose, you know, do I want to plan this with field and fields, or do I want to plan this with wedges? We already have them rotated to 90, and I think it should be quicker with those EDWs or wedges. Let's try that. So I'm guessing that 45s will be enough this time. Whoops, wrong direction. So you change that to 45 out. Okay, so our hotspot's less than 110. So that's a good start. See, we got a little bit of hot spot showing up laterally, so I think all we need to do is add a little bit of weight, you know, to our APPA beams. I really don't want to go over 10% on that AP beam, so I'm going to lock that one. Just add a little bit to that PA beam. So laterally, that got rid of our hot spot over 100, which is what I want. I want that dose laterally to be less than 100. Still a little bit hot maybe, so let's do like 35, so 109. So our hotspot's not really going down anymore. Maybe I'd leave it at like 35. I think this is a good compromise. You know, we don't have those lateral hotspots. Our 50 is still, you know, fairly tight and conformal to our anterior border right here. Hotspot is, we have a lot of 107, but again, we don't have to get rid of the 107. It's usually still acceptable as long as our hotspot is less than 110. And this is the much smaller boost volume. So if you're going to be hot, you want to be hot, you know, in your boost volume or your GTV or your CTV. Something like this is good for wedges. Again, if we did field and fields, we would be able to get rid of all that 107, and it'd be a lot easier. But I think this is okay. So for this week, what I want you guys to do is just to get a good mix. Feel free to please practice and experiment with doing the initial, you know, as a 3 field with field and fields, a 3 field with wedges, a 4 field with field and fields or wedges. Same thing with the boost, experiment, 3 fields, 4 fields, you know, wedges, field and fields. But for your assignment, I'm going to have you do the initial 3 fields, 3 field plan with field and fields, If you did the initial 3-field field and fields, you're likely going to do the boost with field and fields and 3 fields in the clinic, okay? But just to get good practice, I'm going to have you do the boost with 4 fields, and you can do field and fields or EDWs, okay? Once you have, so we have our initial merged plan, so this is a finished plan, just so there's no confusion. Let's label this initial. We have our boost finished plan. We didn't use any field and fields, so we don't have to merge anything. We just have our EDWs. So this is our finished plan here. Boost prescription. Now we need to make our plan sum, okay? So I'm going to come up here to insert new plan sum. I'm going to choose my initial and my boost. And this is what plan sum looks like. So you can see both our prescriptions right here. We have our initial fields and our boost fields right here. I'm going to turn those off. And look, so now our 100% dose in our plan sum is 50/40, right? It's adding up those two plans. So it's adding up 4,500 and 540, and we're seeing a plan sum of both of those plans. So usually what I do is come in here to our isodose lines. 50/40 is our composite dose, our total dose, but our first plan goes to 4,500, right? So I'm going to, whatever line is closest to that initial prescription value, so in this case 4,500, I'm going to change that to 4,500, and I'm going to make it a thicker line. So both our prescription doses are 3. Okay, so then this is what you would likely show the physician, right? So the physician can look at their 4,500 line, evaluate that, make sure their 4,500 PTV is getting the dose that they want, and then they can look at their 50/40 line and make sure that's covering the boost. Okay, and you can see your composite, max dose is only 53.78, so that's pretty good. That's less than 107, right? Even though our boost was getting quite a bit of 107, the composite plan, the plan sum, based on those doses, it's not. So this is a pretty good plan sum. Of course, then you can evaluate your DVH. So if we look at 95%, it's now getting, well, if we look at 4,500, 4,500, 97% of that PTV in the composite plan is getting 4,500, right? It's getting contribution from that boost plan, so more than enough coverage on our 4,500. If we look at PTV 50/40, again, the boost plan is only normalized to 95%, right? But when you look at the plan sum, the dose contribution from both plans in the plan sum, it's almost 100% covered by 50/40. So you have really good coverage, and of course you can evaluate your bladder, you can evaluate your bowel bag, and see if you're happy with those doses. Okay, that's it. That's what I want you guys to do. So you'll have your initial 3-field and field plan. You'll have a 4-field boost, and you can use either wedges or field and fields. 4-field. And then you need to make a plan sum and evaluate your plan sum. So I'm going to give you some dose constraints to meet in your plan sum. Okay? That's it. Let me know if you have any questions.